Team Eduventures, and we're going to be presenting on our project called Edulink, Building an Educational Toolkit for Replication. My name is Molly.
I'm Allie.
And I'm Sam.
So our sponsor for this project is Eduventures. They're a non-government organization that was founded back in 2003 as a data gathering and educational initiative. Currently, their mission is to promote environmental topics to underprivileged youth in Namibia. In order to do this, they use a really active and engaging hands-on approach. They try to make any methods they use most relatable to the youth's everyday lives and context of Namibia so that they can get a more lasting effect. Currently, Eduventures works on a variety of projects, including student projects such as EduMobile, which is actually pictured in the slide right there, and an environmental comedy sketch to educate on environmental topics as well. The other side of the projects is the teaching approach, which is where our focus will lie on a project called Edulink.
In this presentation, we will cover topics such as education for sustainable development and environmental education in a global context, or ESD and EE globally, education within Namibia, Edulink project done by Eduventures, and methods for replication to be done on the Edulink project.
So starting off with some of the global initiatives for education for sustainable development, which is largely being led by an organization called the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, or UNESCO. So starting in 2005, the UN declared it the Decade for Education for Sustainable Development, or the DESD. This was the first major place in putting education as a pathway for sustainable development, and really focusing on teaching our youth in order to spread sustainability concepts. This ended in 2015, and following the end of that decade, UNESCO published the Sustainable Development Goals, which were a series of goals that kind of laid out a plan for sustainability across the world. One of these included Education 2030, which kind of accelerated using ESD in classrooms. To supplement this, UNESCO also published the Global Action Program, which was a list of specific priority action areas for which countries could focus on in order to actually implement ESD into their classrooms. And one of these included building the capacities for teachers and educators.
Currently, within the Namibian education students, there are many obstacles that impact the students' learning experience. Many teachers have difficulties teaching because they lack the necessary skills to create engaging lessons that promote learning, or they have issues with the content itself, which leads them to create confusing or illogical explanations for students. There's also a language barrier that may exist in Namibian primary school. Currently, students are taught in their regional language from grades 1 to 3, which is usually their first language. When they reach grade 4, the curriculum is then taught in the English language, which is often their first exposure to the English language. So this creates a difficulty as students are now required to continue to excel and learn their lessons, but it becomes difficult when they first have to understand their lessons. There are also barriers to ESD specifically within the Namibian classrooms. Oftentimes teachers don't understand ESD content, or they don't understand the need for awareness, so they can't teach it in their classrooms. Teachers also lack the necessary skills to be able to incorporate ESD content within their lesson plans. And finally, the curriculum currently excludes ESD content, and teachers must adhere to the curriculum. So in order for ESD to be taught within Namibian classrooms, ESD content must be included within the curriculum.
So in order to break down these barriers, Eduventures set up the Edulink project. This project basically works on a multiplier effect, which is where you have one resource that can then influence a few more resources, and then each of those can influence even more. So in the context of the Edulink project, you have one or a couple ESD educators. They go and train and teach classroom teachers, and then those classroom teachers can take the skills they learned and apply it into their classrooms at the schools. In order to do this, Eduventures has set up 9 ESD centers across Namibia, at which the teachers come and get a training through online courses and modules in a learning management system that they currently use as Google Classroom. Then they can take these resources and the learning management system back to their schools and use it in their classrooms. And currently, the Edulink project has come to a conclusion in terms of the Namibian context of it, but now the Eduventures is looking to take the Edulink project, wrap it up, and be able to send it off somewhere else for replication. So when we talked to our sponsors, they mentioned hypothetically sending this off to South Africa so that they can go and build this project up within their own context and culture.
So going off what Ali said, in order for this project, the Edulink project, to be spread outside of just Namibia, we need to follow some project replication guidelines, which we have laid out 3 of them here. So the first of being rate of delivery and access, it's important that the project is easily accessible for people who are trying to replicate the project and that it's easy for them to understand. The second is that it's able to be expanded. The nature and the structure of the project must allow for additions and iterations and replications to be made. And the third is that the standards of quality must remain the same throughout the entire project, so that means the integrity and mission of the project stays the same regardless of where it's being implemented. So this leads us into the goal of our project, which is to create an educational toolkit that summarizes the Edulink project and how it was created in Namibia that allows for others to replicate it in other contexts outside of Namibia.
So in order for our team to achieve these goals, we have laid out 4 main objectives. The first one being to analyze the Edulink project from its creation period to where it is now. Then we'll be identifying any content that we want in our replication toolkit. We'll then construct the toolkit and finally evaluate our toolkit. So to analyze the project, we're going to conduct a series of semi-structured interviews. These interviews will give us knowledge and insight to how Edulink was created. We'll be talking to past IQP students from WPI who worked with EduVentures, and more specifically on the Edulink project, creating modules that are still being currently used and implemented. We'll then talk to the EduVentures staff themselves to get their ideas on how this project had gone. We'll ask everyone questions such as what was the most effective thing that you saw? What were some of the challenges you faced and how you overcame them? And if you could change something about the project, what would it be and why? We'll send out a very similar survey to the ESD educators just to get a user feedback side of it, as they are the ones that mainly use this project.
So moving into our second objective, which is to identify the content needed for our toolkit, we have outlined 3 methods by which we will be doing that. The first is sponsored guidance. Our 2 kind of advisors within EduVentures have been working directly on the Edulink project and therefore can give us very feedback on what should be in the toolkit. And we will also have access to the previous work that they have done for the Edulink project in order to assess what needs to go in. The second is to use the results from all our interviews and surveys that were outlined before and kind of compile what was the common themes amongst all of them, the 3 different groups that we interviewed, and seeing what should be included in our toolkit. The final step would be to do a needs analysis, which is an assessment on what can go into something. So there are 5 main steps to a needs analysis. The first of which being to identify the users and uses for the needs analysis, which in the case of our project will be our project team as well as our sponsors. The second step is to identify the target population for which you will be doing an analysis on. The third step is to identify the needs and problems. And the fourth is to assess the needs and problems. We will be doing this by assigning a weight to each of the needs that we come up with, and therefore we are creating a feasible solution that hits the most amount of needs possible. And then the 5th step is to communicate the results.
Our third objective is the actual construction of the toolkit. The toolkit will contain a summary of the Edulink project, a step-by-step procedure for replication, and a compilation of all materials and documents part of the Edulink project. As per our sponsor's request, we will be using Smart Notebook to construct the toolkit. Smart Notebook was used by past IQP teams to construct modules for the Edulink project, and it is also compatible with Google Classroom, which is the learning management system used by Edulink. We want our toolkit to be beneficial to everyone who might be impacted by it, so we will be designing our toolkit using universal design for learning principles in mind, which is a way of thinking that allows for every learner in a classroom to succeed no matter their ability. Our 4th objective is to evaluate the toolkit. So after the construction of the toolkit, we'll be sending it back to EduVentures for feedback and reviews. Data saturation is the point in the research process where no new information is discovered. In terms of our project, this means we will have reached data saturation when there are no new proposed changes to the completed toolkit. This is a timeline of our 7 weeks we will be spending in Namibia. Weeks 1 and 2 will be gathering information and conducting interviews on the Edulink project. Weeks 3 through 5 will be compiling documents and creating the proposed toolkit. Week 6 will be assessing the effectiveness and gaining feedback to make changes. And week 7 will be finishing the final deliverable and writing our report.
So in the conclusion of the 7 weeks, we expect to have created a very valuable toolkit, which will again contain a step-by-step procedure of how to replicate this project, an analysis of the challenges that were faced in this creation process, and of course how to overcome them, along with some supplemental educational materials and modules that can be used by anyone working on this project. We expect the impact of our project to not only translate the spread and success of the Edulink project from Namibia, but to also increase the awareness and understanding of environmental education in a more global context.
We wanted to end our presentation with a quote from the former UNESCO director, Irina Bokovo. We really feel as though this quote sums up the importance of spreading this project beyond just Namibia and really reaching a global audience. So the quote reads, "Education is the most powerful path to sustainability. Economic and technological solutions, political regulations, or financial incentives are not enough. We need a fundamental change in the way we think and act." Thank you so much for listening to our presentation, and thank you to our advisors for all your support and help in completing this project. Does anybody have any questions?
Do you foresee having to break down certain cultural patterns that were ingrained in the Namibian Edulink thing before you can package it globally?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, so definitely there's like a lot of the big part of the modules that were already created were kind of applied to a Namibian context. So that's therefore in creating replication, we want to create a part that kind of explains like, here's how to do it in your context.
So I love the teacher model, very effective. In regards to the toolkit you're going to assemble, do you have information on what worked in terms of, you know, when the teachers talk to other teachers, but, you know, so going down to that level of teachers that were taught, you know, I think about myself and when I teach here, you know, I love to think the students know 100% of what I tell them. The fact is, you probably don't, right? Most of what I say, maybe half of it, 20% of it, is really important. And so, you know, do you have a way of capturing and understanding what 20% that's being taught is really, really essential?
So that's probably going to be part of our discovery phase when interviewing EduVenture staff and ESC educators. We want to know what worked in the Edulink project and what didn't, so that we can put what worked in the toolkit and try and figure out ways to combat what didn't work in the toolkit.
There's been a couple of past IQPs that have gone and worked directly and made modules for this project, and as part of their IQP report, they did an analysis on like a post assessment on like after using the modules, and we'll have access to all that information too, so that could be another reason.
So this project, the origins though, came about for specific countries asking for EduVentures to share their best practices, right? Could you kind of tell that story to clarify some of the reasons behind it?
Sure. So when we had our Skype call with our sponsor, we actually found out that our project was not what we thought initially, and then they started kind of explaining what they want, which is what we just presented today. And that we didn't know it, but they had wrapped up the Edulink project in terms of like making new modules like for them and for Namibian context. And then they mentioned we mentioned also too the South African example. They said like if South Africa was like, hey, we want to do this project as well, we want like to make it our own for like some village maybe in South Africa. They want EduVenture wants to be able to take this project, wrap it up almost as like a template and like a step-by-step procedure. So then South Africa can go and take it and make it their own kind of project as well.
Actually, are any of the Edulink folks here from last year? Yeah, yeah. Do you have anything to say about this?
Not specifically. I guess like our biggest issue was, I mean, you probably won't run into this, but SmartBook capabilities. So I don't know if they're going to suggest that they're using SmartBook. But yeah, when we originally got there, we thought we were going to have more capabilities to play around with, and we also had another almost sponsor, so Nadine, and so she didn't really understand that EduVentures wanted us to use Smart Notebook, and Smart Notebook is not as cool as you think it can be. Like she's like, oh, something should pop up over here, and I was like, no. So I don't know what you guys are going to suggest, if you're sticking with Smart Notebook or.
Yeah, we we realized after our SOGEC call that we need to basically, one of the first things we need to do when we get there is find out what format they want this deliverable in, whether it's like a web page link off of their website, or if it's just like a PDF compiled of everything they've got, because they said they have scattered documents all over their office. They said there's some under one's desk and someone else has stuff under their chair. Like, so we have to figure out what format suits them the best, so that even that they can still use it and that it's easy for anyone in any other country or organization to be able to like pick it up and be like, I can follow this now and do it myself.
Good. Any last questions? Thank you very much.